Hello, my name is Elena Koung. I'm a PhD student from the Health and Play Lab at Penn State University. I'm excited to share my research, Gender Toxicity in Competitive Gaming, Women's Perceptions and Responses. In this paper, we explore women's experiences and their unique responses to gender toxicity. My personal interest in this topic comes from playing games competitively and a desire to work with gaming communities to reduce toxicity. Competitive gaming enables billions of players worldwide to engage in competition, collaboration, and social interaction. Yet these spaces are shaped by toxicity, a culture of negative behaviors that harms in-game experiences and mental well-being. So far, we've seen how toxicity takes many forms, from verbal abuse to in-game sabotage, and how it disrupts competitive play overall. But toxicity doesn't affect all players equally. For women and gender diverse players, toxic behavior often takes the form of sexism and gendered harassment, where gender biases create additional barriers to participation. This is where my research focuses. Gendered biases in gaming are shaped by cultural expectations of how women should play and participate. Research has shown that stereotypes about women's skills, motivations, and role preferences exaggerate real differences between genders. These stereotypes often discourage women from competitive play. Even when trying to participate, women avoid and decrease their visibility to cope with gendered harassment. At the same time, research shows that toxic behavior disrupts competition and creates cycles of aggression. Toxicity is normalized in gaming communities, and it's difficult to know how to break the cycle. What is missing from this work is an understanding of women's experiences with toxicity in competitive play. Despite valuable work on toxicity in competitive games, additional gender threats remain underexplored. Much of the existing research disproportionately represents male perspectives. For example, one study with 25 participants included only 4 women, and another included just 3 women out of 18 participants. The limited research on toxicity towards women in competitive gaming often overlooks the complexity and diversity of women's experiences and frames gender toxicity within a simple male-female dichotomy. We know only a little bit about the experiences of trans women players, and the research here is still limited. The gender toxicity gap matters because without centering women's perspectives, we risk oversimplifying how toxicity is experienced, reproduced, and managed in competitive gaming. By examining how women themselves perceive and navigate toxic environments, we can move towards a more inclusive and nuanced account of competitive play. Our paper addresses this gap in understanding how women face gender biases in competitive gaming as gender toxicity. We inclusively demonstrate how gender toxicity manifests and reveal additional responses to gender toxicity that are distinct from coping with harassment. Our study uses 2 research questions, focusing on forms and responses, extending prior research by foregrounding women's perspectives and by situating gender toxicity not only as harassment, but as a troubling interaction within competitive environments that shapes women's participation. To answer our 2 research questions, we conducted semi-structured interviews with a diverse group of 28 women in North America. We used reflexive thematic analysis to analyze the data. So, to answer the first research question of what forms of gender toxicity do women experience in competitive games, I'll present 4 unique forms of gender toxicity in the following slides. Starting with the first form, we found that social exclusion through gendered expectations affected women's perceived agency and belonging to the competitive community. Many participants described how gendered expectations targeted their gaming engagement because it could be internalized, leading to women excluding other women. For instance, the concept of pick-me girls existing in gaming social dynamics affected how P10 perceived other women's engagement, discouraging her from openly embracing her interests. The second form we found also targets women's gaming engagement, affecting their mental well-being in various ways through unprovoked hostility to their presence in game. For example, P8 described toxic players targeting her mental well-being through in-game sabotage, ruining the competitive integrity of her game. The third form of gender toxicity targets women's competitive identity. P5 described how perpetrators invalidate women's performance and competence, often accusing women of achieving their ranks unfairly. The fourth and final form of gender toxicity also targets women's personal identity through transmisogyny. P26 described transmisogynistic microaggressions that damages her identity. Specifically, trans women face intersectional toxicity and must continually perform additional mental and emotional labor to navigate toxic environments and mitigate harm. Now I'll move on to our findings for the second research question. How do women respond to gender toxicity? In the following slides, I will address 3 unique responses to gender toxicity. The first response is to be prepared for gender toxicity before starting a game. Participants such as P10 selectively participated in game communications and limited their exposure to gender toxicity through anticipation to mitigate harm. The second response shows how women desire justice and proactively pursue change. Many participants stated the importance of taking action when facing gender toxicity, such as P20 flaming back, in order to refocus the team and maintain the competitive integrity of the game. Participants believed that taking action was not only beneficial for themselves individually, but could teach perpetrators that gender toxicity was not acceptable. The third and last response to gender toxicity is personal growth. P14 demonstrated how she built resilience through adverse experience, now feeling that she could just shrug off something misogynistic said to her in game. Our paper showed that individuals have power to challenge gender toxicity through confrontation and seeking justice. And so, in the current landscape, the responsibility for driving change often falls on players most affected by marginalization within gaming spaces. However, collective action challenges oppression more effectively than individual action. Participants suggested that people close to them, such as friends and significant others, may also play an active role in challenging gender toxicity. Moreover, many participants emphasize the importance of mutual support through social media in mitigating the negative effects of gender toxicity. These findings together indicate that gender toxicity marginalizes women in a sexist meritocracy. Game researchers have acknowledged that women are marginalized in many ways. Our paper highlights how gender toxicity reinforces women's marginalization and restricts their competitive opportunities. Under a sexist meritocracy, women's skill-based achievements and efforts are distorted and devalued simply based on gender. Most of all, competitive gaming is a sexist meritocracy that can justify forms of gender toxicity that further women's exclusion from competitive spaces. Finally, our paper addresses design implications that would be beneficial for game developers, tournament organizers, and community managers. Some highlights of our design implications are women-focused tournaments, brave spaces, increased moderation transparency, and even restorative justice. And that concludes my presentation. I've only been able to give a brief overview, but the full paper goes into much more depth. I invite you to read and explore the details and implications further. If you want to chat about this work or connect with me, feel free to reach out by LinkedIn or email. The links are on my website through the QR code. Thank you for your time and attention.